Hi, everyone. Pastor Fulachna here. Welcome to our Epistle Bible study for this week, which will be centered on what happens on Sunday, July the 18th. It happens to be for the eighth Sunday in Pentecost, but it's a rerun. Yeah, we have an unusual circumstance here. And so let me tell you what we're going to do. First of all, the epistle study is from Ephesians chapter 2, and we're reading from verses 11 to 22. Ephesians 2, 11 to 22. And that comes out of the 3-year lectionary series that we're using. It happens that for a few weeks earlier in the summer, about a month ago exactly, we had switched over unintentionally to the 1-year lectionary series. And back on June the 13th, almost exactly a month ago, I had done an epistle Bible study on Ephesians 2, 13 to 22. Covered almost all the verses that are covered in this week's study. So, for the first time ever since we've started recording these videos, we're going to use the library that we've put together. And so after you're done listening to this brief little introductory thing, I want you to go to our YouTube channel, CTK Church Danville, and I want you to go to the videos, and you'll see about 150 of them. And if you go back to June the 13th, you will see the Epistle Bible study for that week. And again, it's Ephesians 2, 13 to 22. And there you will have the meat, the core, and the substance of the Bible study for this week. Now, it happens that in the 3-year series, this reading from Ephesians starts with verse 11, 2 verses earlier than it did in the selection that I shared back in June. So I'm going to take a few moments just to touch on those 2 verses, and then I'm going to refer you or transfer you over to the previous video, and we'll see how good you are with these modern technologies that we're putting into your lives. Paul is writing to the Christians in Ephesus. There's a goodly number of believers in Jesus Christ who did not come from in or around Jerusalem or the Holy Land. That means that they're believers in Jesus Christ. However, they don't come from an Old Testament background. They are what we refer to as pagan believers. Not that they're pagan anymore, but their background is pagan. And so Paul finds himself in a situation that's kind of interesting. Like a missionary who, let's say, goes out from a country in Western Europe or from the United States and goes to another country somewhere else in the world and finds out that those people don't have Western European or North American values, understandings, morals, or religious customs or traditions. That missionary has got to find out where his baseline is and how he can establish himself and the message of Jesus Christ that he's bringing in a way that makes sense and touches people. The gospel will fit every cultural setting on earth. The context of that cultural setting is very important to understand, and that's what the work of a missionary is. Paul was a missionary mostly to what we call the Gentiles, those who believe in Jesus Christ as God's only begotten Son, who but did not come from an Old Testament Mosaic background. So in the first 2 verses of the epistle that we have before us today, starts with verse 11, really interesting because the stark contrast is demonstrated. So let me read those verses. Ephesians 2, starting with 11 and 12. Remember that at one time you Gentiles in the flesh, called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, which is made in the flesh by hands, verse 12, remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Wow. The stark, let's say, difference in the profile between an Old Testament believer in Jesus Christ and a Gentile believer in Jesus Christ can surely be understood in the practice of circumcision by the Jews. Circumcision, of course, was given to the people of Israel by God in order to physically mark the males as different. And to be circumcised in an Old Testament understanding means that you are a believer in Yahweh. You are a follower and a disciple of the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, King David, and other of the historical people of the Jewish faith. To be uncircumcised quickly marks you as someone from outside and from pagan backgrounds. So, where the Jews were marked by circumcision as the people of God in the Old Testament and were marked as believers in what we call a monotheistic God, that is to say, one God who reveals himself in unity. And the pagans, whether Greek or Roman or any other, were people uncircumcised of polytheistic God understanding. So, for example, the Greeks and the Romans had various gods who had various departments of responsibility. Neptune was the god of the sea. Zeus had his department. Aphrodite had hers, and so on and so on. If you needed rain and fertility in the multi-god system, you prayed to the god that was in charge of that department. If you were a Jew and you needed rain for your crops and fertility for your animals, you prayed to the same God, the single God, Yahweh. And so we hear the statement and the cry from the Old Testament, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God." That's monotheistic as opposed to polytheistic, multiple gods. Well, Paul now, in writing to the early believers in Ephesus, has a large gathering of people from a polytheistic background, pagan. And among the men, it becomes clear that the Jews who are the circumcised can feel that the uncircumcised are not as high, not as good, not as close to God, not as noble, and definitely foreign. And you know how distinctions can take over, even in Christian settings and in church settings. And so it's not good. This whole epistle is about a call to unity. And the first two verses here begin with a reminder and a little tutorial from Paul to the pagan believers in Jesus Christ at who they are and who they no longer are. At one time, you Gentiles, called the uncircumcision by the circumcised, which, by the way, is made in the flesh and by hands and not by God. Verse 12, remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, and you were strangers from and of Israel, strangers and alienated to the covenants of the promise, including the commandments and such, having no hope without God in the world. So Paul is saying, look, this business of circumcision, it was a gift of God to the Jews. It has become a man-made symbol or sign now that you should not take to heart. Do you, as a pagan believer in Jesus Christ, feel that you need to be circumcised in order that you can be a true believer in Jesus Christ because some of your circumcised believers say so? Paul is saying, don't buy that line. That's not the case. Paul says circumcision is made in the flesh by human hands. So, there shouldn't be that distinction anymore. And because Paul is of that missionary zeal, he has no problem at all seeing how the gospel of Jesus Christ can make people from all different kinds of backgrounds, languages, regions, cultures, traditions, skin colors, dietary differences. Christ makes all one. And that oneness comes from having been a person trapped in sin and condemned to having been made a saint, an heir of salvation through the blood of Christ on the cross. So it's pretty cool what Paul is putting out there in these first two verses. As I mentioned, these first two verses are not included in the Bible study that we used a month ago from the one-year lectionary series. Why? I can't tell you. I don't appoint the lectionary series. There are people who, in a much higher pay grade, have that responsibility than I do. All right, so that's what I was going to say as an introduction. Now, if you want to follow through, and I hope you do, I'd like you to go and search through our CTK Church videos on YouTube to the one for June the 13th of this year. And it is listed as Epistle Bible Study under Trinity 2, Ephesians 2, 13 to 22. All right, let me know how you did. I hope it's not too complicated, but I've got about 150 videos. That includes the worship ones, of course. So we're putting together a library. And what is a library for? A library is to go back into sometimes and to check out references and things that are just waiting on the shelf to be viewed and enjoyed. I hope you will view it, and I hope it will be enjoyable. And since you're in the Word of God, I know you'll be enriched. That's it for now. God bless you. If you're local and you'd like to come visit us at Christ the King, we are back into our Sunday morning Bible study routine. We are meeting at 9:30. That's 9:30 on Sunday mornings in our Bible study room, just off the sanctuary. And then our worship is at 11 o'clock. And we're really happy to be in person again. I was so happy last Sunday when I walked into the church building, and what greeted me? The smell of coffee. Church coffee. Yes, God be praised. All right, my friends, take care. Stay blessed. Keep viewing. Bye-bye for now.